The stagecoach wheel shattered against a hidden boulder, sending Eleanor Fairfield tumbling into the frozen New Mexico darkness as gunshots erupted around her. And the February wind of 1878 cut through her traveling cloak like 1,000 knives. She hit the ground hard, her shoulders slamming into frozen earth as screams filled the air. The other passengers scattered like frightened quail as masked bandits circled the overturned coach, their horses snorting clouds of steam into the bitter cold. Eleanor's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scrambled behind a cluster of rocks, praying the darkness would hide her. "Everyone out! Valuables in the bag!" one of the bandits shouted, his voice rough as gravel. Eleanor pressed herself against the cold stone, her fingers numb even through her gloves. She had been traveling from Santa Fe to Roswell to take up a position as a schoolteacher, carrying everything she owned in a single trunk that was now somewhere in the wreckage. The temperature had been dropping steadily since sunset, and now the night air felt like it could freeze a person solid where they stood. A gunshot cracked through the air, and Eleanor flinched, biting down on her glove to keep from crying out. She heard the bandits rifling through luggage, heard the terrified pleas of the other passengers. Her mind raced. She had to move, had to get away before they found her, but where could she go? The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, nothing but desert scrub and rock formations barely visible in the moonlight. Another shot. More screaming. Then the thunder of hooves as the bandits rode off, taking whatever they had stolen and leaving chaos behind. Eleanor waited, counting her heartbeats before she dared to move. When she finally crept from her hiding place, she found the coach driver and guard examining the wreckage, the other passengers huddled together, some weeping, others in shocked silence. "Is anyone hurt?" The driver called out, his weathered face pale in the moonlight. "My arm," one man groaned. "I think it is broken." Eleanor stepped forward on shaking legs. "I am unhurt. What do we do now?" The driver looked at the shattered wheel, then at the injured passenger. "We are about 15 miles from Roswell. I will ride ahead for help. The rest of you need to stay with the coach, keep warm as best you can." But there was no warmth to be found. The temperature continued to plummet as the night wore on. The guard built a small fire from what dry brush he could find, but it barely made a dent in the bone-deep cold. Eleanor wrapped her cloak tighter around herself, but her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She had grown up in Boston, where winters were harsh, but this was different. This cold was alive, predatory, reaching for exposed skin with eager fingers. The other passengers clustered around the meager fire. There were only 4 of them now besides Eleanor. The injured man, an elderly woman who had not stopped shaking since the attack, a young married couple clutching each other, and the guard who kept the fire going. Their breath formed clouds in the air, and frost was beginning to form on their eyebrows and the edges of their clothing. "How long until help comes?" the young wife asked, her voice thin with fear. "Couple hours, maybe more," the guard replied, not meeting anyone's eyes. Eleanor knew what he was not saying. At this temperature, a couple of hours could be deadly. Already her fingers and toes felt distant, numb. She stamped her feet, trying to keep the blood flowing, but exhaustion was setting in. The terror of the attack, the bone-rattling cold, the shock of it all, it was draining her strength faster than she had thought possible. Time became strange. Eleanor found herself drifting, her mind floating away from the cold and the fear. She thought of her mother's warm kitchen back in Boston, of summer days by the harbor, of anything but the present moment. The fire seemed to be growing smaller, or maybe her vision was narrowing. Someone was talking, but the words sounded far away. Miss, you need to stay awake." Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. When had she closed them? The guard was looking at her with concern. "I am so tired," she whispered. "I know, but you have got to keep moving. Walk around, do not let yourself fall asleep." She tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate properly. The world tilted, and she would have fallen if the young husband had not caught her arm. "She is freezing," he said to the guard. "We all are. That fire is not enough." The guard's jaw tightened. "I am doing everything I can." Eleanor forced herself to move, to pace in small circles around the fire, but every step felt like wading through deep water. The elderly woman had gone quiet, slumped against a rock, and Eleanor wondered distantly if she was still alive. The injured man was moaning softly, clutching his arm. The young couple held each other, their lips blue in the firelight. Then, cutting through the haze of cold and exhaustion, Eleanor heard it. Hoofbeats. The guard jumped to his feet, his hand going to his pistol. Everyone tensed. Were the bandits coming back? But the rider who emerged from the darkness was alone, and when he stepped into the firelight, Eleanor saw a tall man in his mid-20s, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat, his face shadowed but his eyes sharp and alert. "Heard there was trouble out this way," he said, his voice low and steady. "Name is Garrett Dawson. I have got a ranch about 5 miles north." The guard lowered his pistol. "Thank God. We have got injured people here, and this cold is going to kill somebody if we do not get them warm soon." Garrett's gaze swept over the group, and Eleanor felt his eyes pause on her for just a moment before moving on. "My place is closer than Roswell, and I have got a wagon. I can take 3, maybe 4 on the first trip." "Who is worst off?" "The old woman," the guard said. "And this lady here, she is about done in." Eleanor wanted to protest, to say she was fine, but her tongue felt thick in her mouth, and the words would not come. Garrett was already moving toward his horse. "I will be back in 20 minutes with the wagon. Keep that fire going and keep everyone moving. Do not let them sit still." True to his word, Garrett returned quickly, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. He loaded the elderly woman first, then helped Eleanor up into the back. The young couple climbed in as well, the wife refusing to leave her husband. The guard and the injured man would wait for the second trip. Eleanor huddled in the wagon bed, her body shaking so violently she could not control it. Garrett noticed and pulled a thick blanket from under the driver's seat, draping it over her. "Hold on," he said. "We will have you warm soon." The ride to his ranch passed in a blur. Eleanor was aware of motion, of voices, of being carried inside somewhere warm. Heat surrounded her, almost painful after the brutal cold, and someone was wrapping her in more blankets, pressing a cup of something hot into her hands. "Drink this," a woman's voice said. "Slowly now." Eleanor sipped what turned out to be sweet tea, feeling it burn down her throat. Her eyes focused gradually, and she found herself in a modest but comfortable parlor, sitting in a chair near a blazing fireplace. The elderly woman from the stagecoach was on a nearby sofa, also wrapped in blankets, and the young couple sat close together on the floor, their backs against the sofa. The woman who had given Eleanor the tea was middle-aged with kind eyes and graying hair. "I am Margaret Dawson, Garrett's mother. You just rest now. You have all had a terrible shock." Garrett himself was already heading back out the door. "I will get the others," he said. "Be careful," his mother called after him. Over the next hour, Garrett made 2 more trips, bringing back the guard, the injured man, and finally the driver who had returned from Roswell with help, only to find most of the passengers already gone. A doctor had come from town as well, a weary-looking man who examined everyone carefully. "You are all lucky to be alive," he said, setting the injured man's arm with efficient movements. "Another hour in that cold and we would be talking about frostbite, maybe worse." Eleanor sat by the fire, slowly thawing, as Mrs. Dawson bustled about providing food, blankets, and endless cups of hot tea. The house was not large, but it was warm and solid, a testament to careful building and maintenance. She learned that Garrett and his mother ran a cattle ranch, just the two of them and a handful of hired hands who lived in the bunkhouse. "My husband passed 3 years ago," Mrs. Dawson explained as she ladled stew into bowls. "Threw from a horse." Garrett came back from working a cattle drive in Texas to take over the ranch. He has kept it going well. As the night wore on, the other passengers gradually succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep where they sat. The doctor left, promising to send word to Roswell about the attack and the passengers' whereabouts. Mrs. Dawson retired to her room, and the house grew quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the wind howling outside. Eleanor knew she should sleep, but every time she closed her eyes she was back in the frozen darkness, hearing gunshots, feeling that terrible cold seeping into her bones. Her heart would race and she would snap awake, gasping. After the third time, she gave up and simply sat staring into the fire, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. "Cannot sleep." She jumped at the voice and turned to find Garrett standing in the doorway. He had removed his coat and hat, revealing dark hair and a face that was younger than she had first thought, though weathered by sun and wind. "I keep seeing it," she admitted quietly, "feeling it. That cold." He nodded and crossed to sit in the chair opposite hers, a respectful distance away. "That is natural after something like what you went through. It will get better with time." "Were you going to sleep?" she asked, suddenly aware that she might be keeping him up. "I was. But I figured someone should keep watch, make sure the fire stays going and everyone stays warm. That cold is vicious tonight." As if to emphasize his point, a gust of wind rattled the windows. Eleanor shivered despite the warmth of the room. "You are safe here," Garrett said, his voice gentle. "I promise you that." "I do not even know you," Eleanor said, and immediately regretted the words. "I am sorry. That was rude. You saved our lives." "It is all right. You are right to be cautious, but I give you my word no harm will come to you under this roof." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire popping and hissing. Eleanor studied him covertly. He had a strong profile, a straight nose, and a firm jaw. His hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were calloused and scarred from hard work. Everything about him spoke of competence and quiet strength. "Thank you," she said finally, "for coming for us, for bringing us here. I truly do not know what would have happened if you had not." "Someone would have helped," he said. "Maybe. But you are the one who did." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Eleanor felt something shift in the air between them. His eyes were blue-gray, she noticed, like storm clouds. "What brings you to New Mexico?" he asked. "I am a school teacher, or I was supposed to be. There is a position waiting for me in Roswell, teaching at the town school." "That is good. Roswell needs more teachers. Too many children growing up without proper education." "What about you?" "Your mother said you came back from Texas," he nodded. "I was working cattle drives for a few years after I finished school. It was good money, good experience. But when my father died, my mother needed me here. This ranch has been in our family for 15 years. I could not let it go." "That must have been hard, giving up that life." "Some days it is, but this is home, and my mother needs me." Eleanor found herself warming to him beyond just the physical heat of the fire. There was something genuine about Garrett Dawson, something solid and trustworthy. In her experience, those qualities were rare in men. "You should try to rest," he said. "You have been through a lot. So have you. You rode out in that cold multiple times tonight. I am used to it. You are not." But Eleanor did not want to close her eyes again, did not want to face those frozen memories. "I am not ready yet. Would you mind if I just sat here for a while?" "Not at all. I will be up anyway, keeping watch. Then I will keep you company." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I would like that." They talked quietly as the night deepened, their voices low so as not to wake the others. Eleanor told him about Boston, about her decision to come west after her father died and left her with no family ties. She spoke of her love of teaching, of books, of the excitement and terror she had felt boarding that stagecoach in Santa Fe. Garrett told her about the ranch, about the challenges of keeping cattle alive in the harsh New Mexico climate, about the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. He spoke of his father with obvious affection, of learning to ride before he could walk, of nights spent under the stars on cattle drives. "You miss it?" Eleanor asked. "That freedom of the trail," he considered the question. "Sometimes. But freedom is not worth much if you have got no one to share it with. Here, I have got my mother, the ranch, a community. That matters more." As they talked, Eleanor felt the fear that had gripped her since the attack beginning to loosen its hold. The warmth of the fire, the solid walls around her, and most of all, Garrett's steady presence, all of it combined to create a sense of safety she had not felt since leaving Boston. Outside, the wind continued to howl and the temperature continued to drop. But inside, the fire burned bright and warm. "The frozen night," Eleanor said suddenly, voicing the thought that had been circling her mind. "It scared me deeply. Not just the cold itself, but what it represented. How quickly everything can go wrong, how fragile we all are." Garrett leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "That is true. We are fragile, but we are also stronger than we think. You survived tonight. You are here. Because of you, because you did not give up, because you held on until help came." Eleanor met his eyes across the firelit space between them. "Will you tell me something honestly?" "If I can. If you had not come, would we have made it?" He held her gaze, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. "Some of you might have, but in that cold with no proper shelter. No, probably not all of you." A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with temperature. "Then I owe you my life." "You do not owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "Not anyone. You did what a good man would do. There is a difference." She saw color rise in his cheeks, visible even in the firelight. "You should rest now," he said again, but more gently this time. "You are safe. I will be right here, keeping watch." Eleanor wanted to protest, to keep talking, but exhaustion was finally catching up with her. The warmth, the food, the emotional drain of the night, all of it pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. "You promise?" she asked, her voice already drowsy. "You will stay awake, I promise. I am watching over you." Those words wrapped around Eleanor like a shield as she finally let her eyes close. She drifted off with the image of Garrett in the chair across from her, his presence a bulwark against the frozen night and all its terrors. When Eleanor woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and the house smelled of coffee and frying bacon. She sat up with a start, disoriented, and found herself covered with 2 blankets instead of the one she remembered. The fire was still burning low in the fireplace, and Garrett was asleep in the chair where she had last seen him, his head tilted back, his face relaxed in sleep. He had stayed, all night, watching over them. Mrs. Dawson appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray of coffee cups. She smiled when she saw Eleanor awake. "Good morning, dear. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. What time is it?" "Nearly 8. I let everyone sleep. After what you all went through, you needed it." The other passengers were beginning to stir as well. The elderly woman, whose name Eleanor learned was Mrs. Patterson, looked much improved though still shaken. The young couple, Henry and Sarah Mills, were whispering to each other, relieved to have survived the night. The injured man, a traveling salesman named Robert Tucker, had his arm in a proper sling now and was gingerly testing his fingers. The driver and guard had left at first light to continue on to Roswell and report the attack to the sheriff. Garrett woke as the house filled with activity. Eleanor saw him blink, stretch, and then his eyes found hers across the room. He gave her a small nod as if to say, "You see, you made it through the night." After breakfast, which Mrs. Dawson provided with seemingly endless generosity, the conversation turned to what everyone would do next. A wagon was being sent from Roswell to collect the passengers and what could be salvaged from the stagecoach. "You are all welcome to stay here as long as you need," Mrs. Dawson said. "We have room enough, and I will not send anyone out until they are ready." Most of the passengers were eager to complete their journey to Roswell as soon as possible, wanting to put the terrifying experience behind them. But Eleanor found herself hesitant. The thought of leaving this warm, safe house and venturing back out into the world felt overwhelming. Garrett noticed her reluctance. "You do not have to go if you are not ready," he said quietly, catching her alone in the parlor while the others were packing their meager belongings. "I am expected in Roswell. The school is counting on me. A day or two will not make a difference. You need time to recover. I cannot impose on your hospitality any longer. It is not an imposition." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "To be honest, I would feel better knowing you had proper rest before continuing. You went through something traumatic. Give yourself time." Eleanor looked at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, and felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Why do you care? You do not know me." "Maybe not. But I know you are a long way from home and you have been through hell. I know what it is like to be alone in a new place. If I can make it a little easier for you, why would I not?" The wagon from Roswell arrived an hour later. The other passengers gathered their things and said their grateful goodbyes to the Dawson family. Eleanor stood with them, torn between the safety of staying and the duty of going. "What will you do, Miss Fairfield?" Mrs. Dawson asked. Eleanor looked at Garrett, at his mother's kind face, at the warm house behind them. She thought of the frozen night, of how close she had come to dying, of how fragile everything really was. Life was short and unpredictable. Why spend it doing only what was expected? If the offer still stands, I would like to stay another day or two, just to recover my strength. Mrs. Dawson's face lit up. "Of course it stands. We would be delighted to have you." Garrett said nothing, but Eleanor saw satisfaction in his eyes. The wagon departed with the other passengers, leaving Eleanor alone with the Dawsons. It felt strange, being in a house with people she barely knew, but also right somehow. Safe. "Come," Mrs. Dawson said, linking her arm through Eleanor's. "Let me show you around properly. If you are staying, you should know where everything is." The ranch was modest but well maintained. The house had 4 bedrooms, a parlor, a kitchen, and a small library that made Eleanor's heart sing when she saw the shelves of books. Behind the house were the barns, corrals, and bunkhouse where the ranch hands stayed. Mrs. Dawson explained that they usually employed 6 to 8 men depending on the season, but right now it was winter and they were down to 4. "Garrett does most of the work himself anyway," she said with maternal pride. "Always has, even as a boy. Could not keep him inside if you tried." Eleanor helped with lunch preparations, insisting on making herself useful. As they worked, Mrs. Dawson asked about her background, her family, her plans. "Boston to New Mexico is a big change," she observed, rolling out dough for biscuits. "I needed a change. After my father died, there was nothing keeping me there. My mother passed when I was young. I have no siblings, no other family. I wanted to see something of the world, to make a difference somewhere. Teaching is noble work. Children need good teachers. I hope I will be good at it. I have taught before, but only in a private school for girls in Boston. A frontier school will be very different. You will do fine. You have steel in you. I saw it last night, the way you kept yourself together when others were falling apart." Eleanor was surprised. "I did not feel very strong. I felt terrified." "Being strong does not mean you are not scared. It means you keep going even when you are." When Garrett came in for lunch, Eleanor found herself acutely aware of his presence. She noticed the way he moved, economical and sure, the way he treated his mother with obvious affection, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. He had rolled up his shirt sleeves, and she could see the muscles in his forearms, the result of years of hard physical labor. "How are things out there?" Mrs. Dawson asked him. "Cold but manageable. The cattle are holding up well. I checked the fence line on the north pasture and found a section down. I will need to fix it tomorrow." "Take one of the hands with you." "I will." He looked at Eleanor. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, much better. The rest helped, and your mother's cooking." "She is the best cook in 3 counties. Do not let her modesty fool you." They ate together, the conversation flowing easily. Eleanor learned that the ranch ran about 300 head of cattle, that they sold beef to the army fort near Roswell, that water was always a concern in this arid climate. Garrett spoke with passion about the land, about the challenge of working with nature rather than against it. "Some ranchers try to force the land to do what they want," he said. "They overgraze, they do not plan for drought, they do not respect what this country is. It always ends badly." "And you respect it?" Eleanor asked. "I try to. I listen to what the land tells me. Some years are good, some are hard. You adapt." After lunch, Eleanor asked if she could borrow a book from the library. Mrs. Dawson encouraged her to take her pick, and she spent a happy hour browsing the titles. She selected a volume of poetry and another of natural history, then settled into a chair in the parlor to read. But she found her attention wandering. Through the window, she could see Garrett working in one of the corrals, training a young horse. His movements were patient, gentle, coaxing the animal rather than forcing it. Eleanor found herself watching him instead of rating, admiring his skill. When he caught her looking, he waved. She blushed and waved back, then determinedly returned her attention to her book. That evening, after supper, Mrs. Dawson announced she was tired and retired early. Garrett and Eleanor found themselves alone again, this time sitting on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky. "It is so big," Eleanor said, tilting her head back to take it all in. "The sky, I have never seen so many stars. One of the benefits of living out here, nothing to block the view. In Boston, you could barely see the stars through all the coal smoke and city lights. Do you miss it?" Eleanor considered. "I miss some things, but I do not think I miss the place itself." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. I felt the same way when I left to work cattle drives. I was excited to see new places, but I always knew I would come back here. This is where I belong." "How do you know where you belong?" Eleanor asked. "I have been searching for that my whole life." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I think you know it when you feel it. There is a rightness to it, like puzzle pieces fitting together. You stop fighting and start settling." "I have never felt that. I have always felt like I was on my way to somewhere else." "Maybe you just had not found your somewhere yet." Eleanor looked at him in the starlight. "Maybe." They sat in comfortable silence, the cold night air sharp in their lungs, but the blankets and each other's company keeping the worst of it at bay. Eleanor thought about the previous night, about the terror of the frozen darkness, and marveled at how different she felt now. 24 hours could change everything. "Can I ask you something?" Garrett said. "Of course." "Last night when you said the frozen night scared you deeply, was it just the cold, or something more?" Eleanor drew the blanket tighter. "Both. The cold was terrifying, yes, but it was also the suddenness of it all. One moment I was safe in the stagecoach, traveling toward my new life, full of hope and plans. The next moment, everything was chaos and danger, and I thought I might die before I even got a chance to live. It made me realize how little control we actually have, how quickly everything can be taken away. That is true. We do not have as much control as we think, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. How is that not bad? Because if we are not in control, that means we can be surprised. We can be rescued. We can have things happen that we never imagined or planned for. If you controlled everything, you would never have ended up here. Here, freezing on a porch in New Mexico, he laughed, a warm sound that made Eleanor smile. Here, safe and alive, looking at the stars. That is a good point. I am occasionally capable of those. They talked until the cold drove them inside, and then talked some more by the fire until Eleanor could barely keep her eyes open. This time, when she went to bed in the small guest room Mrs. Dawson had prepared for her, she fell asleep immediately and slept dreamlessly until morning. The next day, Eleanor insisted on helping around the ranch. Mrs. Dawson put her to work with the household chores, and Eleanor found satisfaction in the simple tasks of cooking, cleaning, and mending. In the afternoon, Garrett asked if she wanted to see the ranch properly. "I should probably stay and help your mother," Eleanor said, though she wanted very much to go. "Nonsense," Mrs. Dawson said, appearing in the doorway with flour on her hands. "You have done more than enough. Go enjoy the sunshine while we have got it. Winter days like this are rare." Garrett saddled 2 horses, a tall roan for himself and a gentler mare for Eleanor. "Have you ridden much?" he asked. "Some, but not recently. I may be rusty. Daisy here is patient. She will take care of you." They rode out across the ranch land, Garrett pointing out various features and landmarks. The landscape was stark but beautiful in its own way, all red rock and sparse vegetation, with mountains rising in the distance. The sun was bright and the air crystalline, and Eleanor felt something in her chest expand. "It is so different from Boston," she said. "Better or worse. Just different. There is a beauty to it once you learn to see it." They stopped on a rise overlooking a valley where some of the cattle were grazing. Garrett explained his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to slowly expand the herd, improve the bloodlines, maybe add some sheep. Sheep and cattle together. I thought ranchers kept those separate. Some do. But I think there is room for both if you manage the land right. Sheep can graze where cattle cannot. It makes sense to me. Eleanor heard the passion in his voice and realized something. "You love this. Not just the ranch, but the work itself. The challenge of it." "I do." Some people think ranching is just about owning land and letting animals eat grass. But it is so much more than that. It is about understanding the weather, the grass, the water, the animals themselves. It is about working with all those elements to create something sustainable. It is like a puzzle that is never fully solved. That is how I feel about teaching. Every student is different. Every day brings new challenges. You have to constantly adapt. He turned to look at her. "Then we are alike in that way." Their eyes met, and Eleanor felt that shift again, that sense of something significant happening. The attraction she had been trying to ignore suddenly became impossible to deny. She saw it reflected in Garrett's face, in the way his gaze intensified and his breathing changed. "Eleanor," he said softly, and the way he said her name made her heart race. But then his horse shifted, breaking the moment, and Garrett cleared his throat. "We should head back. My mother will have supper ready soon." They rode back to the ranch in a silence that was no longer quite so comfortable, both of them aware of something new and fragile between them. That evening, after Mrs. Dawson had again retired early, Eleanor and Garrett found themselves in the library. Eleanor had mentioned wanting to read more, and Garrett had offered to show her his favorite books. "My father loved to read," he explained, running his fingers along the spines. He believed education was important, that ranchers should not just be laborers but thinkers. He collected books whenever he could. "What are your favorites?" He pulled down a worn copy of Essays by Emerson. "This one. My father gave it to me when I was 16. I have read it a dozen times." Eleanor took the book, careful with its fragile binding. "I would have taken you for more of a practical man than a philosopher." "Cannot I be both?" she smiled. "I suppose you can. What do you love about Emerson? The way he writes about self-reliance, about trusting yourself and nature. It resonates with ranch life. Out here, you have to rely on yourself because help might be hours or days away. But you also have to trust that nature has a rhythm, and if you work with it, things will turn out." They sat together on the small sofa in the library, discussing books and philosophy, and Eleanor felt herself falling into something she had never quite experienced before. It was not just attraction, though that was certainly present. It was recognition. A sense that she had found someone who understood her on a fundamental level. "I should go to Roswell tomorrow," she said reluctantly. "I have already stayed too long." "Have you?" Garrett asked, his voice low. "I cannot hide here forever, no matter how much I might want to." "You are not hiding. You are healing. It feels like hiding, like I am afraid to face the world after what happened." Garrett set down his book and turned to face her fully. "Do you want the truth, always?" "I do not want you to go." Eleanor's breath caught. "Garrett, I know we just met. I know it makes no logical sense. But these past 2 days, having you here, talking with you, it has felt right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time. And I think you feel it too." She did. God help her, she did. But this was madness. She was supposed to be a schoolteacher in Roswell, not falling for a rancher she had known for barely 3 days. "I have responsibilities," she said weakly. "I know. And I am not asking you to abandon them. I am just asking you to acknowledge that there is something between us. Something worth exploring. What if there is not? What if it is just gratitude on my part because you saved my life?" "Is it?" he challenged. "Is that all you feel?" Eleanor looked into his eyes, those storm cloud eyes that had watched over her through the frozen night, and knew she could not lie. "No, it is not all I feel." "Then stay a little longer. Get to know me, let me get to know you. If after a week you still want to go to Roswell, I will drive you there myself. But give this a chance." Every logical part of Eleanor's mind screamed that this was foolish, that she was being reckless, that she should stick to her plan. But there was another part, a part that had been silent for most of her life, that whispered that maybe plans were meant to be broken. Maybe the frozen night had taught her that control was an illusion, and the only thing worth holding on to was the moments that made you feel alive. "1 week," she said. Garrett's face broke into a smile that transformed him from handsome to beautiful. "1 week. Thank you." He reached out and took her hand, and the touch sent electricity through Eleanor's entire body. They sat there, hands clasped, until the fire burned low and the house grew cold around them. The next morning, Eleanor sent word to Roswell that she had been delayed by the stagecoach attack and would arrive the following week. She felt guilty about the delay, but the school board's return message was understanding, telling her to take all the time she needed to recover. With that weight lifted, Eleanor allowed herself to simply be present at the ranch. She helped Mrs. Dawson with the household tasks, learning how to make bread from scratch and how to preserve meat for the winter. She spent time with the ranch hands, listening to their stories and learning about cattle ranching. And she spent time with Garrett, riding out across the land, talking by the fire, learning the shape of his mind and heart. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her by surprise and made her laugh until her sides ached. She learned that he was patient to a fault, never losing his temper even when things went wrong. She learned that he carried guilt over his father's death, feeling that if he had been home instead of in Texas, he might have prevented the accident somehow. "You cannot know that," Eleanor told him one evening as they walked along the fence line checking for damage. "Accidents happen. You being there might not have changed anything. I know that in my head, but my heart believes something different. Your father would not want you to carry that guilt. No, he would not. He would tell me to live my life, to be happy, to honor him by doing good work and treating people fairly. I know that, but knowing and feeling are different things." Eleanor understood. She carried her own guilts, her own what-ifs. What if she had been a better daughter? What if she had stayed in Boston instead of running away to the frontier? What if she was making a mistake right now, letting herself fall for a man she barely knew? But when Garrett took her hand as they walked, those doubts faded. When he looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, she felt seen in a way she had never experienced. When he laughed at something she said, joy bloomed in her chest like spring flowers. Mrs. Dawson watched their growing attachment with obvious approval. "I have not seen my son this happy in years," she told Eleanor one afternoon as they peeled potatoes. "You are good for him." "I barely know him, though. How can I be good for someone I barely know? Sometimes knowing happens fast." "I knew I would marry Garrett's father the day I met him. He helped me when my horse threw a shoe in town, and something about the gentle way he handled that animal told me everything I needed to know about his character. We were married 3 months later. 3 months! That is so fast." "When you know, you know. Do not overthink it, dear. Feel with your heart, not just your head." But Eleanor had always been a person of the head rather than the heart. Logic, reason, planning, those had kept her safe and stable her whole life. Following her heart felt dangerous, like stepping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch her. On the 5th day of her extended stay, a storm rolled in. Not a blizzard like the night of the stagecoach attack, but a fierce winter storm nonetheless, bringing snow and wind that made venturing outside treacherous. The ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse, and the 3 inhabitants of the main house found themselves snowed in together. Mrs. Dawson used the time to teach Eleanor more domestic skills: how to quilt, how to make candles, how to treat various ailments with herbs. Garrett worked on repairing equipment and tack, his hands nimble with leather and tools. In the evenings, they played cards and told stories, the storm raging outside while warmth and laughter filled the house. On the 2nd night of the storm, Mrs. Dawson went to bed early with a headache, leaving Eleanor and Garrett alone once more. They had fallen into a pattern of these evening conversations, and Eleanor had come to treasure them. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked, watching Garrett's hands as he worked on repairing a bridle. "Sometimes. The work keeps me busy, but there are times when I wish for more. Companionship, partnership, someone to share the load with. Have you ever come close? To marriage, I mean." "Once. A girl in Roswell, daughter of the general store owner. We courted for a while, but she wanted to move to a city, somewhere like Denver or San Francisco. She could not imagine spending her life on a ranch. I could not imagine spending mine anywhere else, so we parted ways." "Do you regret it?" "No. If we had married, one of us would have been miserable. That is no foundation for a life together." He paused in his work and looked at her. "What about you? No suitors back in Boston?" "A few. Nothing serious. I think I intimidated most of them. I was too educated, too opinionated, too independent. Men generally do not like those qualities in women." "Then they were fools. Those are exactly the qualities that make you fascinating." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "You are easy with compliments. Only when I mean them, and I mean that one." He set aside his work and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. The firelight played across his features, and Eleanor was struck again by how handsome he was. But more than that, by how good he was. In less than a week, she had seen him be kind to his mother, patient with his animals, fair with his workers, and gentle with her. If she had tried to design the perfect man, she could not have done better than Garrett Dawson. "Eleanor," he said, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What?" "Your week is almost up. The day after tomorrow, if this storm clears, you could leave for Roswell, and I realized I cannot let you go without being completely honest with you." "Honest about what?" He took her hands in his, and the touch sent familiar shivers through her. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have already fallen. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but it is the truth. These past days with you have been the best of my life. You challenge me, you make me laugh, you make me want to be better than I am. And I hope that you might feel the same way." Eleanor's breath caught. Every rational thought in her head screamed caution, but her heart was screaming something else entirely. "I do," she whispered. "I feel the same way. It terrifies me, but I do." "It terrifies me too," Garrett admitted. "I have never felt like this before, like my whole world has shifted and nothing will ever be the same. What do we do? I want you to stay, not as a guest, but as a real part of my life. I want to court you properly, to give us time to build something real and lasting. I want to show you that what we feel is not just a reaction to the drama of how we met, but something genuine. But the teaching position in Roswell is 20 miles away. You could still teach there if you wanted. Or you could teach here, start a school right on the ranch for the workers' children and any others in the area. Or you could do something else entirely. I do not want to take away your dreams, Eleanor. I want to be part of them." Eleanor looked at their joined hands, at the firelight dancing on his face, at the sincerity in his eyes. She thought about the frozen night that had brought her here, about how close she had come to death, about how that experience had taught her that life was precious and short and not to be wasted on fear. "I want that too," she said. "I want to stay. I want to see where this goes." The smile that broke across Garrett's face was like sunrise. He pulled her close, and Eleanor went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, everything was warm and safe and right. "I am watching over you," Garrett murmured into her hair, echoing the words he had spoken that first terrible night. "I always will." "I know," Eleanor said. "That is why I am not afraid anymore." When they finally kissed, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise rather than passion, the first kiss of many to come. Eleanor felt something inside her settle, like a door closing on her old life and a window opening on her new one. The storm cleared the next day, and Eleanor sent another message to Roswell, this time explaining that she would not be taking the teaching position after all but would be staying at the Dawson Ranch. She felt guilty about the last-minute cancellation, but the school board found a replacement teacher quickly and sent back their understanding and congratulations when they learned the reason for her change of plans. Over the following weeks, Eleanor truly became part of the ranch. She and Garrett courted properly under Mrs. Dawson's watchful and approving eye, taking walks, riding together, talking about their hopes and dreams. Eleanor learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the satisfaction of a job well done, the simple pleasures of a home-cooked meal after a long day. She also started teaching, just as Garrett had suggested. She gathered the children of the ranch hands and a few from neighboring ranches, setting up a small schoolroom in one of the unused outbuildings. 3 times a week, she taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history to a class of 8 children ranging in age from 6 to 14. It was challenging work, different from teaching wealthy girls in Boston, but infinitely more rewarding. Garrett watched her teach one day, leaning against the doorframe of the schoolroom. Afterward, he told her, "You are a natural. Those kids adore you. They are good students, eager to learn. Because you make it interesting." I was listening. "You do not just lecture at them. You ask questions, you let them figure things out. That is real teaching." Spring came to New Mexico, transforming the landscape from brown and dormant to alive with color. Wildflowers bloomed across the rangeland, and the cattle grew fat on new grass. Eleanor had been at the ranch for 3 months, and it felt more like home than anywhere she had ever lived. On a warm April evening, Garrett asked her to take a walk with him. They climbed to the rise where they had gone on their first ride together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "I have something to ask you," Garrett said, taking both her hands in his. Eleanor's heart began to race. She knew what was coming and found that she was not afraid, only excited. "Eleanor Fairfield, I love you more than I can put into words. You have brought light and laughter into my life. You have made this ranch into a true home. You challenge me, support me, and make me want to be the best man I can be. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Eleanor said, the word coming easily and surely. "Yes, absolutely yes." Garrett pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly for the first time. Not the gentle exploratory kiss of their first night, but something deeper and more passionate. A kiss that spoke of commitment and desire, and a future together. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony in Roswell, with Mrs. Dawson as Eleanor's matron of honor and one of Garrett's ranch hands as his best man. The town turned out for the celebration, curious to meet the schoolteacher from Boston who had captured Garrett Dawson's heart. Eleanor wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Dawson had helped her sew, and Garrett wore his best suit, and when they exchanged vows in the small church, Eleanor felt her whole world click into place. This was where she belonged. With this man on this land, building this life. Their wedding night was spent in a hotel in Roswell before returning to the ranch the next day. Eleanor was nervous, but Garrett was gentle and patient, and what passed between them was both sweet and profound, a physical joining that cemented the emotional bond they had already formed. Back at the ranch, they settled into married life. Mrs. Dawson had moved into a smaller room, giving the newlyweds the master bedroom. Eleanor threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning skills she had never imagined needing. How to treat sick cattle, how to keep accounts, how to work alongside the ranch hands during busy seasons. She continued teaching, and word of her school spread. More children came, some from ranches 20 miles away, their parents willing to make the journey so their children could have an education. Eleanor loved the work, loved seeing young minds open to new ideas, loved the feeling of making a real difference. The first year of their marriage flew by in a blur of work and love, and building a life together. They had their challenges: a drought one summer, a difficult calving season, disagreements about how to manage the ranch, but they worked through everything together, learning to communicate, to compromise, to support each other. Eleanor wrote to her old friends in Boston, describing her new life in vivid detail. Some were scandalized that she had abandoned her teaching position for a cowboy, but others wrote back with envy and longing, wishing they had the courage to follow their hearts the way Eleanor had. On their first wedding anniversary, Garrett gave Eleanor a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For your thoughts," he said. "I know you love to write, and I thought you might want to record our story." Eleanor started writing that very night, beginning with the stagecoach attack and the frozen night that had changed her life. She wrote about fear and courage, about finding love in unexpected places, about learning to trust her heart instead of just her head. 6 months later, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She knew childbirth was dangerous, especially out on a remote ranch far from doctors and hospitals. But Garrett and Mrs. Dawson were both confident and supportive, and Eleanor found courage in their certainty. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and fall. Eleanor continued teaching until she grew too uncomfortable to stand for long periods, then held classes from a chair, her students giggling at their teacher's growing belly. In December, as the weather turned cold again, Eleanor went into labor. Mrs. Dawson acted as midwife, having delivered many babies in her time on the frontier. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Eleanor was sure she would not survive. But with Garrett holding her hand and his mother coaching her through, she brought their son into the world on a cold December night exactly 1 year after that first frozen night that had brought them together. They named him Thomas, after Garrett's father. He was healthy and loud, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. Garrett cried when he held his son for the first time, and Eleanor fell in love with him all over again, seeing the tenderness with which he cradled the tiny baby. "He is perfect," Garrett whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are amazing. I cannot believe you did this." "We did this," Eleanor corrected. "All of us. Your mother, you, me, we are a family, and they were." Thomas thrived, growing strong and healthy under the watchful eyes of his parents and grandmother. Eleanor returned to teaching when he was 3 months old, bringing him to the schoolroom in a basket and letting the older girls take turns holding him when he fussed. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before but richer too. Eleanor marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 years ago, she had been a lonely spinster in Boston, teaching privileged girls who barely paid attention. Now she was a wife, a mother, a teacher of frontier children, a partner in running a cattle ranch. She had found purpose and love and belonging in the last place she had expected. When Thomas was 6 months old, another winter storm blew through. Eleanor stood at the window, watching the snow fall and remembering that frozen night that had started everything. The fear was still there in her memory, but it was distant now, overlaid with everything good that had come from it. Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about? That night. The stagecoach attack. How scared I was. Are you sorry that you came west, that all of it happened?" Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "Not for a single second. That night brought me here to you, to this life. I would go through it 100 times over if it meant ending up where I am now. I am glad you feel that way, because I cannot imagine my life without you anymore. You and Thomas, you are everything to me." They kissed, long and slow, still finding new depths to their love even after 2 years together. When they pulled apart, Eleanor glanced over at Thomas, sleeping peacefully in his cradle by the fire, and felt overwhelming gratitude for this life she had built. The years passed, bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch prospered under Garrett's careful management and Eleanor's help with the accounts and planning. They added sheep to their operation, just as Garrett had dreamed, and proved that the two species could coexist on the same land with proper management. Eleanor's school grew too, eventually requiring a dedicated building rather than the converted outbuilding they had started with. Garrett and the ranch hands built her a proper schoolhouse, with large windows for light and a good stove for heat. Eleanor taught there for over 30 years, educating multiple generations of children and earning a reputation as one of the finest teachers in New Mexico territory. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. When he was 3, he got a little sister named Margaret after her grandmother. 4 years after that came another boy, James, and then finally a second daughter, Sarah. The house that had once seemed spacious became wonderfully cramped with the noise and chaos of children. Mrs. Dawson lived to see all 4 grandchildren grow up, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Eleanor mourned her deeply, having grown to love her mother-in-law as much as she had loved her own mother. The older woman had been her guide and friend, teaching her how to be a ranch wife and a frontier woman. As Eleanor and Garrett grew older, they slowly handed over more of the ranch work to Thomas and the hired help, but they never stopped working entirely. Garrett still rode out to check the cattle well into his 60s, and Eleanor still taught until she was 70, only retiring when her eyes grew too weak to read small print without difficulty. They spent their later years sitting on the porch together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, marveling at how their love had multiplied and grown. Thomas married a girl from Roswell and had 3 children. Margaret became a nurse and married a doctor, moving to Albuquerque but visiting often. James took over the sheep operation and married his childhood sweetheart. Sarah became a teacher like her mother, taking over Eleanor's school when she retired. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge celebration. The ranch was filled with people, with music and laughter and food. As Eleanor looked around at all the faces at the life she and Garrett had built together, she felt complete. That evening, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Eleanor and Garrett sat on their porch as they had so many times before. They were both gray now, their bodies marked by age and hard work, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "You remember that first night?" Eleanor asked. "When you stayed awake watching over me, I remember every detail, the way the firelight caught in your hair, how scared you were, how brave you tried to be. I thought I was going to die that night, from the cold, from fear, from everything. But you did not, you lived. We both lived. And built all of this." Eleanor gestured at the ranch, at the house, at everything around them. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it is real, that this is my life." Garrett took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to plague his joints. "It is real. You are real. This love is the realest thing I have ever known." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the New Mexico sky in familiar, brilliant colors. Eleanor thought about the young woman she had been, terrified and frozen on that December night so long ago. That woman would never have believed the life that awaited her, the love and joy and purpose she would find. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. "For what? For staying awake, for watching over me, for loving me. That is easy. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The frozen night that had once scared her so deeply had led her to this. A life filled with love, a family that would carry on after her, a legacy of learning and care. As stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Eleanor Dawson closed her eyes and smiled, grateful for every moment, every choice, every twist of fate that had brought her to this porch, this man, this perfect life. She had been lost and frozen once, but Garrett had watched over her, had kept her safe, and together they had built something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone, and in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.